Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
Welcome back to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Aaron Syme, founder and CEO of WebRTC.Ventures. WebRTC.Ventures is a custom design and development agency focused on building live video applications, and we're here to help you take your application live. You can learn more about us at WebRTC.Ventures. Thanks for joining us live today on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch, and welcome also to any of you watching a replay of today's event. For those of you with us live, you can ask questions throughout the stream by leaving a comment in whichever platform you're viewing this. For today's episode, I'm joined by Dan Nordale, CRO at Symbl.ai. Symbl.ai's technologies are fueled by their proprietary LLM Nebula. Today, we'll explore 4 use cases where generative AI is elevating live interactions, AI agents and AI agent assist in the contact center, intelligent meetings, and enhanced sales training. Thanks for joining me today, Dan.
Aaron, it's a real pleasure to join you. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of great conversations offline outside of this and done work together. And so excited to have you in WebRTC Live today and talk about some of these really interesting use cases, ways that we can combine LLMs with other communication technologies like WebRTC. Why don't we start with you giving us an introduction to Symbl and the Nebula LLM?
That sounds awesome. So Symbl is about a 5.5-year-old company focused from its inception on human interaction. So what we find, and on all the kind of cool projects that we work on together, Aaron, is the peculiarities of human conversation are equal parts extremely valuable. We know this is where tremendous value is created for organizations. We also know they're finicky, they're peculiar, they're unique, and how we understand them deeply and how we facilitate the different use cases which we'll go through puts particular requirements on AI and insights that you're surfacing this structured data from unstructured data. So we provide a platform for developers primarily that ingests sort of real-time audio, video, and we maintain our own kind of AI models, which run the gamut of transcription, sort of ASR transcription, NLU capabilities to classify and understand conversations. You mentioned Nebula, which is a very purpose-built, low latency, highly accurate for conversational tasks LLM. It's our foundation model we built, and more and more adding kind of that text-to-speech element to complete the loop on these sort of complete automated experiences, which is one of the particular use cases. So we have a lot of really interesting customers who are really stretching the limits of how you use AI and how does that assist both your employees to make them better, and how does it assist your conversations, these durable, long-term, long-ranging conversations that you're having with consumers, and how do we make those rich to serve the consumers' intents and needs, and also make those fruitful for organizations as well.
Yeah, excellent. So you want to talk us through a little bit of what you've got here on the slide?
Yeah, you bet. So as I talked about the platform, it's sort of this diagram really is a high flyover. There's a lot more depth, but obviously busy slide I'll sort of walk through. But you know, business conversations happen in a variety of different places. We'll talk about meetings, we'll talk about calls, video interactions, voice bots. There's a lot of different venues and technologies that are facilitating business conversations. We make it easy to ingest that audio in real time. Obviously, we do it on recordings as well, but the platform is highly engineered to deliver really outsized outcomes in conversations in real time. And when that audio or video or even text comes into the platform, it runs through a series of models which structure data to return to the application. That data can be in the form of specific sort of single task insights. Those could be, what are all the questions that were asked during that conversation, and are we recognizing sales objections in real time, returning to application sub-second, so that application can, in a sales scenario, bring up guidance for a seller in terms of how to overcome that objection, bring up guidance for a service a service representative to facilitate time, sure resolution, but also efficient resolution of customer need. More and more that transitions into generative insights. And so again, that's where Nebula comes in, and that really opens up a huge range of potential. But where we see the significant kind of momentum in that space, and we'll talk about this more in the use cases, but is, can we use an LLM to deeply understand the context midpoint in a conversation based on what's said, and can we return very bespoke, specific, context-aware guidance that understands what's been said, it understands the context around that type of interaction, it understands the sentiment of both the customer, prospect, and the employee, and it probably understands the psychological underpinnings of what's going on around that type of interaction, and it responds accordingly. And it responds in a time frame that allows the seller, allows the customer service agent to use that intelligence to deliver better outcomes. And so, going through the AI, the techniques and the structured data is used to classify interactions. It's used to identify very specific topics or issues that are raised, and it allows you to stream that sort of intelligence out into these use cases. I won't go through the use cases. We're going to talk about them more, but all of the models are built based on human conversation, and that's how Symbl differs from. There's a lot of really neat companies doing a lot of really innovative things, obviously, in the generative AI space. We differ in that this is all we do, is human conversations. All the models are foundationally built from conversation data, and that makes them a bit more efficient, faster, but also way more accurate.
Yeah. And so, and everything's around audio, around that human conversation, as you said. And, I think everything that, you could use Symbl with recorded data like post-call analysis and stuff like that as well. But most of what we'll talk about today, and I think where a lot of the really interesting stuff is too, is like mid-conversation, right? And that's where the generative AI can come in of giving us guidance throughout a conversation, like you said. So I think that's really interesting, and then integrating this into the rest of your application is kind of where where somebody like us comes in, or your development team comes in, is that Symbl provides the APIs around all of that audio and sending that, processing it, getting it back, and then building it into the rest of the application. So this could be telephony related. This could be WebRTC video. This could be WebRTC audio only. This could be a lot of different use cases that we would use this in.
It's an interesting point, Aaron. And at the risk of this sounding promotional for WebRTC Ventures, What we
take the
find
risk.
is I'll just go right out there.
Just kidding.
No, but what we find is the barriers of leveraging advanced, if it's WebRTC, sort of video technology, or certainly in the AI realm, opens up this spectrum of delivering really advanced communication powered or centered applications for users around specific problems or opportunities. And that's great. And that's a boon to the industry. What we find when you do that is it's extremely important that as you're designing and as you're delivering those applications, that you understand the unique implications of real-time communications to someone who's in the throes of trying to do their job. And that sounds simple, but that has a lot of implications on how you design and how you deliver an application and how you build in tolerance in applications to actually drive beneficial productivity and better outcomes, as opposed to the knock on our industry is we deliver applications that harass people in the moment. And I think that's really fundamentally a design and understanding of how to use real-time communications in a flow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and by the way, for those of us watching live today, make sure you stick around for the end of today, where we'll have a brief industry analysis conversation with Tsahi Levent-Levi, and that's something that we'll talk about in that segment too. Is I think what is interesting to me about all of this is the unique value that we can provide by combining this technology with communications, and there's a lot of interesting development work to be done there, a lot of potential that you can unleash with it. And so let's start diving into some use cases and talk about that. I want to talk first about intelligent meetings. And I think by now, probably most of us have been in a call where using, pick your meeting tool. I've seen it in a variety of them now, where someone pulls in invites an AI assistant into the call to do some recording and send out some notes afterwards. So I think that's kind of, the first step to what an intelligent meeting could be like. I think there's a lot more that could be done with that for sure. So let's talk about, what's your perspective on intelligent meetings, Dan?
It's a great topic. I think we together, I think, run into this a lot. I think we all see tremendous potential, and I think we all feel we as an industry are scratching the surface. So where we see the most momentum in terms of structure, particularly as we think about this from a business perspective, because I think that's where we're both anchored, and that's the lens that we view the market. So if you started backward in the equation, if we started by what happens after a meeting, it starts to illuminate what we want to happen in the meeting, particularly relative to execution in the meeting. How do we make people better in the meeting? That's I think obvious. I don't want to say simple. It takes thought. But then what should happen after the meeting? So we're working on some interesting applications in sort of vertically specific SaaS applications. So think of very unique applications that would be very tailored to run an accounting firm or a law firm, or these are, these aren't technology. We don't think of these as technology forward industries. However, a lot of stuff happens that has tremendous value, excuse me, after the meeting. The meeting triggers all of the value that those firms deliver to their clients. And I don't want this to sound like a bash, but a generative summary of the meeting is nice, but it's not the structured data that feeds the follow-on workflows for that business. If it's an accounting firm, we talked about probably 5 follow-on activities. you, Mr. Client, you're going to get me some records. We are going to send you a pack of how we're going to prepare for year end. We have a particular tax issue that we're going to dive into and research for you. There are very structured, very detailed things, and they're work items, and there's a workflow around it. And we want to capture them, and we want to distribute them to the right people, and we don't want to lose detail around it. And so that's just one example of, if we start with the end in mind, we can deliver some extremely useful, productivity enhancing, and really outcome enhancing capabilities in the context of the meeting. And that's where we think the excitement, and really where unique value is going to be delivered in AI relative to meetings.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think the the stuff that we most commonly see and experience now as individuals are the post-call transcript or summary, which is great. Yeah, but there's so much more that we can do. I mean, I remember being at Enterprise Connect last year in 2023, and by the way, I'll be there in March of this year, 2024. So anyone watching this going, hit me up if you'd like to meet there. I know Symbl will have a presence there as well.
Yeah.
So looking forward to attending that. But I remember a keynote last year, I believe it was Google, that showed this very impressive meeting utopia of you have a call, and then AI is helping to prepare your presentation based on that call, and taking notes and setting up calendar things for you automatically, which all sounds great. But obviously anything that comes from a behemoth like Google, kind of trying to serve everybody, is trying to serve this as broad a use case as possible. And I think what's interesting, and in the type of work that you and I would do, Dan, is looking at things that are really fine-tuned to that enterprise. What are as you said, looking at the outcome of that. What are the outcomes of those meetings? What taking those action items, not just putting them into an email summary or making calendar reminders, but how do we integrate that into the operations of the company as well? And I think there's so much potential there that's unique to each use case. So yeah, we could keep talking just about intelligent meetings, but let's go to a very a different type of not really a meeting, but a call that's very important in the contact center, very important in the enterprise, which are contact centers, right?
I just want to say one last. I want to leave a little thread on meetings, because we're going to talk about this in the context of later on a use case around training, and how do we provide environments for people to get better at their jobs. There's an element of providing the right application experience that goes around video and a meeting, that where I really feel like we together, when we're talking with companies about how to employ video insights to drive better experiences, it's really composing the right application experience that unlocks a lot of value. We'll talk about that later, but I think that sometimes we think about meetings about there's Zoom's the gorilla here, and we have Teams is almost as big, and so we think about that's really that becomes kind of how we view meetings, and there's more to it, so I think we'll have some good examples of that later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about AI in the contact center. There's two different ways we'll talk about this. The first that I'd like to address is the idea of agent assist, and how AI can assist a human agent in the contact center. So maybe start by, Dan, why don't you explain a little bit for our viewers, what we mean by that concept and how it's used?
Yeah, I think the industry's landing on Copilot. I think that's been sort of branded and is becoming more known as the mode at which we're talking about. So we're talking, and this is I think a huge, as businesses have looked at generative AI and said, man, this is a disruptive technology. this is as disruptive as many of the technology um, uh, step function sort of, these waves that have hit us in the past, and we need a strategy for it. I think that the employee assist or co-pilot like experiences are perceived as lower risk. And so I think what we see a lot is these are the early projects that people are undertaking. So how do we frame it as, how do we make our people better in the moment
Mhm.
as they are serving customers, selling prospects, working with in customer success, all these really valuable conversations. How do we make our people better? And that's really what we're talking about, is how does the intelligence trigger application experience that allows people to deliver a better outcome.
Yeah.
And so it's really that chain reaction that we're talking about. And I think that there's a lot of really talented people trying to scratch into this problem. But like a lot of software categories, early categories, is we often boil the ocean. And I think that as we try to help people in the moment, it's I'm going to sort of repeat myself here a little bit, is what are we trying to do? So is the problem statement, we have a lot of young agents, we want to get them on the phone quickly, but we want a safety net for them. It's a great problem statement that can be solved. That's a very targeted solution. Is it we want to provide some additional capabilities to our agents so that they can better understand this psychology of what's going on, the sentiment of what's going on, just so they have some clues so that they slow down if they need to slow down, they speed up if they need to speed up, whatever, they can cure less than opportune or ideal sort of situation with a customer. So that's my kind of overarching thought, is the more specific the problem, the more cool and useful I think the capabilities. But largely it's understanding what's being said in the conversation, and then using, some cases it's just static assistance, but more and more what we're talking about is generative assistance to an agent based on what's been said, and it returns to an agent in real time, a sub-second, and it allows them to understand what is the right resolution path for this customer. What is the right way for me to get to my goal in a sales conversation based on where I am? So that's really what we're talking about, and it's it's a really neat space. I think there's a lot of variety of the right solution for the right situation.
Yeah, I think this is an area that I'm very excited about. I think has tremendous potential. Let's show a little demo here. This is something our development team put together
Cool.
that takes Amazon Connect as a call center tool, integrates that with Symbl's Nebula LLM, and does a little generative AI to provide assistance to a travel agent contact center type of scenario in real time for customers. So let's take a quick look at this.
Thank you for calling Travel.Ventures. My name is Hector. How can I help you today?
Hi, I would like to travel to El Salvador.
Okay, where are you planning to go?
I'm not sure yet. Can you give me some options to visit in El Salvador?
Of course, give me a moment. Here are a few options to consider. The Historic Center. You can discover the rich history and culture of San Salvador by visiting the City Historic Center, which includes the Metropolitan Cathedral, the National Palace, and the San Francisco Church. Does any of these sound like a plan to you?
Yes, I would like to pick the beach option.
Great. When would you like to travel?
I would like to travel in the last week of March. Can you give me information about hotel in San Salvador?
Indeed. Give me a second.
All right. So in that video there, you can see the full video on our blog at WebRTC.Ventures and more about how Hector built that and our team built that application, Hector and Samson in particular. And that application is taking a real-time conversation, right? Taking the audio, getting text from that audio, feeding that into an LLM, getting generative AI answers about different sorts of travel options we could have. And then towards the end where I cut it off, starting to talk about, okay, let's do hotel bookings and stuff like that, right? So we can have something that is a combination of say public information about traveling to particular regions with corporate information about the hotel bookings that we have access to. And so by being able to analyze, pull out the important terms from that, it's just one example that's more generative AI driven. As you mentioned, Dan, we could also be doing things that are more specifically tied to particular pieces of data. Like if somebody mentions a particular product we have, then capturing that from the conversation, going into our product database, pulling up information around that might include sales tips or features we're going to talk about, right? But from the customer's perspective, they were only talking to the human agent. They don't really know that behind the scenes on that dashboard was also text being provided on the bottom from the LLM that was kind of the suggested text to the agent to use that he could use parts or all of in his conversation with the customer.
Yeah, I love what really stuck out for me there is a really cool demo is I think any of us who've been around the contact center space for a while, that call is going to naturally be a fairly long call because there's a lot of the customer doesn't know where they want to go. There's a lot of discovering of what's the right answer here, and there's a lot of dimensions around flights and hotels and location and that. And you could tell how it's shaving, it's just speeding up, it's making that interaction more efficient by deeply understanding exactly what is going on in the conversation and bringing those suggestions. The alternative is the Hector would be in a system banging around with his knowledge of the system based on what he's hearing, pulling out a couple attributes and trying to query systems to bring back. That's a complex, massively complex set of data that we're trying to resolve to get a good outcome for the customer. I love the efficiency story that was sort of underlying that demo. It's cool.
Yeah, and what may not have been obvious from the demo unless you had it in full screen mode and were able to kind of really watch the text going by on the screen is that as the customer is talking, we're not only capturing the text of that, the transcript of that, and displaying that on the screen for the agent in real time, but we're also, before even the agent is responding, the LLM is providing answers based on what it hears and suggestions. And so this is going on in parallel. So as you said, our agent, Hector's voice in this case, he doesn't have to go and type in the search for things to do in San Salvador. It's already providing some answers, right? And so it is all happening in parallel and speeding up that process, speeding up the research process. The same would be true with some of the more specific things that we talked about, like product details or any sales tips around specific products that we're selling.
Yeah, and just to geek out a little bit on the technically what's going on there, that streaming to the LLM returning, which Samsung, who your teams understands, but that capability is not really the typical interaction flow that people, when they're interacting with LLMs, there's a breakpoint. They're wrapping up a prompt. It's going to an LLM. It returns in, however many seconds. Being able to handle real-time communication, leverage an AI tools that can handle streaming both in and out, uh, transform those applications. So now it's way more useful because as you said, it's actually rendering a lot of assistance to Hector in this case in even before the customers stop talking. Right?
Yeah, that's a really important point to bring up because it is different than how we as normal consumers, when we talk about things like ChatGPT, about the way that we're used to interacting with it. You type in a paragraph, you wait a few seconds, it comes back with a response, you read it, you type in something else, right? It's almost asynchronous in nature. It's certainly not full real time or conversational. So being able to do things streaming and in chunks is huge, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's the concept of AI agent assist, where the agent is there talking to the customer and the AI is providing assistance behind the scenes to empower that human agent. What if AI could be the agent itself? So this is an intriguing concept, I think, to consider. So we have another little demo, another variant on that demo that we'll show now, where there is not a human agent directly involved in this demo, but the AI is itself acting as the travel agent, and a little more robotic voice you'll hear in this that helps show that. So let's take a look at that video.
Hello, I would like to book travel to Colombia.
Hello, I'm excited to help you plan your trip. Where would you like to travel to? Please let me know your destination and any specific preferences or requirements you have, so I can provide you with the best options and recommendations.
I'm open to suggestions, but yeah, anything around the coast of Colombia will be nice.
Great. Colombia has a beautiful coastline with many fantastic destinations to explore. Some popular options include 1.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Stunning
Yeah, let's
3.
do it.
Tag. You're welcome. If you're open to suggestions, I recommend starting with Cartagena. It's a fantastic destination with a lot to offer in terms of budget. When would you like to travel and for how long?
It will be for May 15 for a week.
All right, so in that one, we have kind of not the full conversation displayed there. It's a little hop in the conversation because you didn't need to hear all about Hector's travel plans in Colombia. But what you saw there was the human voice. Hector is the customer in this case, interacting with the LLM, who's providing all of the advice on the travel destinations in this case, and then using basically text to speech. So, in Spanish speakers might notice a few pronunciation things there on Colombian cities, Cartagena, but you still see the potential of that, and I think it's a really interesting application for us to consider there. So, Dan, let's hear your thoughts a little bit on the idea of using, in a scenario like this, a travel agent or some other sort of agent that's there's not a human directly in this conversation.
Yeah, I think this is a really for those of us who've been in the sort of industry longer than we'd like to admit, we've talked about these kinds of highly intelligent, deeply knowledgeable systems that can automate interaction with customers, and that's going to be the end of that's going to dramatically reduce the need for contact centers because the systems are going to be that smart and be able to handle most interactions with customers. The reality to this point hasn't played out. However, we do see huge momentum here. So the example here of the ability so if I'm an existing customer and I repetitively interact with you, I travel a lot, you're my travel agent of choice, then I'm pretty receptive to automation in many cases because it's efficient. And so I think that there's huge potential here. But we see it going further. We're seeing this around prospecting calls. So in a sales environment. So the tech, and again, there's some peculiarities in this sort of real-time communication and use of LLMs, that combination around ensuring we're providing this sort of low latency response, but still highly cognitive of intent and emotion and psychology. But it's even deployed in situations where there isn't a durable relationship between called party and calling party. So I think the potential is massive here. To say we scratched the surface might be giving us more credit in terms of how far we've gone, but the infrastructure, the technology, all of this is lined up pretty well we're going to see this a lot. And I don't think in the case, clearly there are higher quality synthetic speech technologies than was in the demo. But I think a lot of times you're not trying to fool anyone. This is somebody, I know what I'm dealing with, but it's highly effective and it's going to get me the outcome I want. And so I think we're in the first inning of this game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, this is what we're seeing here is like the next evolution of what we're all already used to as consumers of a text-based chat bot that's, in its original incarnations was more, more directional and scripted and maybe looking up an FAQ, to now being able to have a text-based chatbot on your website that's, more generative AI driven, to now scenarios where with Symbl, we can also take that around human conversation and make it a more natural interaction. And like you said, we could use better voices than we're using in this demo. We can even do things like real-time translation around this and localized voices as well. We have another blog post coming up on WebRTC.Ventures that will show like a real-time translation type of scenario that's really interesting. You can have all sorts of voices around that. Although there is also the argument to be made that a customer should know whether they're speaking with a human agent or a bot. And so some people make the case that it's valuable for that reason, almost like a disclosure sort of reason, to keep the voice a little robotic, a little unhuman sounding. You can also still have a more pleasant on the ear voice, but just disclose, that this is a bot. All depends on your use case and what you're doing. I think it's really interesting. So yeah, we're not close, and I'm not sure, if it's necessary or we ever would be kind of completely replacing those sorts of agent interactions. But this again can be an efficiency and a scale thing for sure. And like you talked about, you mentioned prospecting, right? Having a successful sort of prospecting interaction and then transferring to a human agent to close the deal, to talk finer details, or in a use case like we showed in this video of kind of booking some travel, just having a human in the loop agent who then gets on with you and confirms before you actually, take the credit card or make the booking that, the dates and the locations and everything are right and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of different ways that we could still combine the AI agents and the human agents and going sort of seamlessly in and out of the conversations and keeping that context across them. So again, limitless, I think, possibilities in this, and very much just scratching the surface.
I agree. I think one important point too is in these scenarios, both in the previous use case, well, all these use cases, frankly, but in this one particular, we're not dependent on the knowledge of the model. So the LLMs, they know a lot. They've been trained on a lot of data, but by using retrieval augmented generation or RAG techniques, the specific knowledge of your organization, so kind of knowledge-based articles, the things that should govern how we respond, and even past conversations with this particular customer, or in a business, sort of if this was a business travel setting, that company's travel, those things can be embedded in a vector database. Those can be retrieved. That actually will govern the response that these systems provide. So that's how we're augmenting the knowledge of the model with your own sort of specific, so that it does respond very appropriately, exactly as we would want a human to. But I think your point's really valid. I think businesses need to decide, do they want this fully auto? Do they want somebody to come in on a larger transaction at the end? Do they, and I think that this dance with what do consumers want? What is our brand? What's reflective of our brand? I think that's gonna, be different probably for every company.
Yeah, absolutely. Very dependent on use case and brand. So lots to consider there from a technical perspective. Tremendous amount of things are possible at this point, and will be soon. So let's go to our final use case as we start to wrap up here. We mentioned it briefly already, the idea of sales training. So talk with us a little bit about how LLMs could be used to augment sales training and other corporate training scenarios.
Yeah, this is a really exciting one. This one I get super passionate about. If we step back one step from that prompt, Aaron, to talk about human performance in conversations, I think generally, so we'd start there and say machines have a unique capability to evaluate performance at scale. And that sounds scary, and I don't think people are dying for machines to grade their performance. And I think that, we're sympathetic to that. I think that that's probably the wrong approach. But where we see tremendous momentum is enabling individual contributors, sellers, customer service agents, to control their own path for improvement. So obviously we have other mechanisms to give people feedback, to evaluate performance, but we can automate the grading of performance in every single interaction. So this can be live, this could be on every call. We can say, man, great, did great in these 3 elements, engage the customer well, you follow process well, you set goals, you establish next steps, did a lot of things really well. Next time you could improve in these areas. And so that's, as we go throughout our day, we're doing our job, we're constantly getting that feedback. This is a really rapid improvement loop that can be provided by machines. We got to put the right guardrails around it. So we see it as this is purely a way for me as an individual to get better. We're working on a really cool project together right now where we actually take it out of the theater of combat, right? The day-to-day. It's actually before, right? And so you can practice your pitch. We all have different pitches, different persona we're selling to, all that. You can practice against a AI, whoever that persona is, right? If you're selling to a lawyer, it could be a lawyer. If it's selling to a particular type of doctor. It could be that. It can, we can mimic the persona. You're pitching to a bot, and it can provide you guidance on how that went and where it can get better. So we're providing now zero variable cost, really, gymnasium for people to work out and get better. And I think it's one of the most exciting ways where this technology, which we often perceive as replacing people, it can be employed to make people tremendously more effective in what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned people maybe would have some nervousness about, some anxiety around sort of the computer grading them. I would also make the opposite argument that there's less pressure in that case in many situations than when you're talking to real humans. So think of this as kind of, I'm a new salesperson, or let's take this to maybe an education scenario. I'm a new teacher lecturing on a new topic. To be able to practice my delivery of that in front of a computer and get some initial feedback before I'm then graded by, a more experienced teacher or something like that, or a more experienced salesperson. There's a lot less pressure there, and gives me sort of a safer environment where I don't care that much how the computer judges me. But it gives me some initial feedback that now makes my say performance evaluation with the sales manager or a supervisor more effective, because I've gotten over some of the basic hurdles, right? I've already been reminded to not and ah so much, or I've been reminded of, you didn't cover this key topic that we try to always say. So when I go into my first evaluation of my sales pitch with the sales manager, I'm already several steps above where I would have been at, because the AI helped me get to that point before I speak to the human, right? So it's making all of those interactions more efficient, and maybe taking even some pressure off of them. So I think there's a lot of really interesting possibilities there. And yeah, we've talked about this in sales training. We could be doing this in education or healthcare training, or really any sort of corporate training scenario. There's potential for this. But in each one of those, again, it's going to be something that I think does require some custom integration, some thought, maybe some custom training, certainly custom data sets, right? So, AI is not coming for our jobs in this case. It's creating a lot of opportunity and additional work that we need to do to unlock the power of this. So
I agree. I think we'd be fooling ourselves too if we didn't think that there sometimes individual contributors, there's generational gaps, there's cultural gaps which get in the way of learning.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's effective to kind of remove those things, and again, it empowers the employee to create whatever trajectory that makes sense for them. And so I just picking up on the point you were making, I think that's spot on, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, Dan, I think we're pretty much out of time here, but really appreciate everybody joining us for this, and I appreciate you taking the time talking about these 4 use cases. There's we'll put up a blog post about this on WebRTC.Ventures. But for those watching who want to get in touch with you or learn more about your work at Symbl, how can they follow up?
So yeah, easy to get me. It's Dan.Nordale at Symbl.ai. So just like you would think it is. For sure, reach out. Happy to answer questions, dive deep. I just love to geek out on this, and really appreciate the opportunity to join you, Aaron. I think all of our interactions are always sort of, you leave inspired for all the things we can do, and so this was no exception.
I feel exactly the same. Really appreciate you taking the time, Dan. It was great speaking with you. And so, yeah, thanks for joining me on WebRTC Live.
Thanks so much.
All right. So as always, this video will be available on the WebRTC Ventures YouTube channel, as well as on our blog at WebRTC.Ventures. Our next WebRTC Live episode will be Wednesday, May 13th with Tsahi Levent-Levi from bloggeek.me, where we'll do a WebRTC industry analysis conversation. And to close out today's episode, in fact, we're going to have a preview conversation with Tsahi, a regular segment we're going to start doing. In this case, we'll be talking about his views on the role of LLMs and web applications. So stick around for that, and then join us again for an extended conversation with him in March. So thanks for joining me on WebRTC Live. Let's make it live. I'm here with WebRTC industry analyst Tsahi Levent-Levi, who I hope you already know from his extensive writings about WebRTC at bloggeek.me. Thanks for joining me today, Tsahi.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's always great to speak with you, and you'll be our guest on WebRTC Live on March 13th. But I wanted to speak with you a bit sooner, and this is a segment on WebRTC Live that you and I will start doing more regularly together, where we have a short conversation about whatever's on our minds with regards to WebRTC. And you've been doing a great job of cataloging all the blog posts that are out there, including ours about Twilio video migration options in your WebRTC weekly newsletter. But we're going to stick with today's topic for today's episode around LLMs and WebRTC. So I'd like to hear your take. Are you a fan of LLMs and WebRTC?
It's hard to say. It's probably somewhere between yes and no. The no part is simple because in many cases, LLM, Gen AI, whatever, feels like market whitewashing that you need to do today to all products. You need to massage them well and say, we're doing LLMs.
Right.
And then, well, we're doing WebRTC with LLMs. That's what we need to do.
Right.
So I understand that part, okay? It was 2 years ago, it was probably AI and the metaverse, or VR, AR, XR, whatever are, and now it's LLMs. So there is no difference from that point of view. I think the difference is that ChatGPT is actually useful.
Right.
Okay. I don't use it a lot, by the way. I use Midjourney more to make images because it's more artistic. And for me, ChatGPT, when I used it, is also for artistic purposes, like figuring out things or thinking about things more than actually using it to make decisions for me. Now, what happens with LLMs is that you use them today to go and ask questions and get answers most of the time. It's like a back and forth conversation, which means that you're going to start seeing them inside bots. Every bot out there is going to add LLM. Why? Because, well, LLM and whitewash whatever it is we're doing with Gen AI. This being the case, you're going to start seeing that also for voice conversations. And in voice, you sometimes need WebRTC. And if you need to connect WebRTC to an LLM, then there's a whole point of how do you do it in real time. Okay. Is that much different than what we've seen in the previous round? I'm not so sure. That's like my gut feeling, just throwing it out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the real-time world and when you're talking about like voice and talking with an LLM, so to speak, there's been some interesting examples and we're doing it ourselves. But it's, there's still some latency in that. It's built in, the round trip of speech to text, LLM, text to speech back, in a pure voice conversation has some latency in it still for sure. Though, as happens with technology, it's getting faster. It'll continue to get faster. So I think, we'll see that continue to improve and be interesting. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting space, and the real-time aspect is interesting because we are making a leap from slowly perhaps leading the way with marketing speak, but the chat bots where you can handle some of that latency to more pure real-time interactions with LLMs that I think with time are going to be really interesting. I'm optimistic, although selective perhaps in in how I want to use them at this point. I don't think they're replacing a lot of things, but there's a lot of augmentation possibilities.
I think that when you talk about latency, it's interesting to see how things changed. It started with, let's run a call. At the end of the call, we have a file. Let's send that file, ship it to AWS Lex to get the transcription of that. Then we started saying, no, we need it faster. How do you do it faster? You cobble a WebSocket and connect the WebSocket so that the file is being created in the back in order to do that. Then today we're trying to connect WebRTC directly to the part that is doing the speech to text in the cloud or on the edge sometimes. But then you see something interesting. I saw that a few years back in a conference in China, where what they did was connect the microphone to speech to text so that they show it just on the panel next, because there are Chinese there and you're the only American speaker or Israeli speaking in English. So the translation was there. So you see this happening and you see these words in English in between. Then you started seeing a lot of the real-time speech-to-text solutions where what they do is they fix what they write or what they output based on context. So they would start saying one thing or writing one thing and then start modifying it as it moves along, because they understand that there is context to the word, and because of the context, it sounded like one thing more than another, but it's likely more the other thing than that first thing. You can't do it if you're adding an LLM and you're saying it needs to be faster. Because now I can't go back with my text to speech after passing the text into the LLM already. So what's going to be the solution there? That's going to be interesting.
Right.
Of how do you squeeze that pipeline even further to get faster, low latencies. And on the other end, I guess we'll have the same problem, though I don't know that as well, of getting the text from the LLM and then doing the text-to-speech part. And without having that sound robotic or adding all of the nuances of human speech with the pauses and words that are higher or lower in volume and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, how do you do that fast enough to figure out what I'm actually thinking in my head a few words into the future?
Yeah. Well, I think those are great points. And I think that, to me, that's what's interesting about this is what instead of, like WebRTC becoming simpler and sort of replacing the development that needs to be done, instead of AI kind of replacing development, everything you just identified are what makes integrating these things together complex, right? Because you can send it out to an LLM and even get that transcript in close to real time, but it's going to be less accurate than the transcript that takes a little bit more time to process, factors in the context, like you said. And so from a development perspective, you want both worlds, right? You want to show something, even if it's a little inaccurate, as fast as you can, but then, say after the call in a contact center, the summary that you store with it, you want to be the more accurate summary. Right. And so you're you're doing double the processing. You're maybe even updating things on the screen, a few seconds after they happen to show the more accurate context driven version. Like there's all this complexity there that you can build in. Right.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's a fascinating space, and we could have a whole nother segment just talking about the idea of text to speech and avatars and how much could we do that in real time if we wanted to, because there's a lot of interesting developments there. But we're running short on time already, which is why it's good that you and I have a full episode to talk in March. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I was looking at a couple of websites, right? Like LiveKit has their LiveKit agents that's coming out now. Daily, right on their homepage now, says real-time voice, video, and AI for developers, right there in the key value statement, right? So even if it's marketing speak, right, the AI is getting wrapped in to the core value statement of CPaaSs, which is interesting.
The AI part, I can relate and connect to a lot better than just saying LLM. I think it's a lot broader in nature, and it has different utilities. So I can do AI on the codec level. I can do it on the network level. I can actually integrate it with algorithms inside WebRTC versus saying, well, we've got this thing that does speech, so let's do an LLM because ChatGPT.
Right.
It's a lot less obvious and a lot harder to decide what to do there than with an LLM on top of WebRTC and saying, well, let's talk to Santa because it's Christmas. I think I've seen about 3 of these in December timeframe, which is nice. It shows it shows what the power of LLMs.
Possibilities.
Yes. But is that the real use case or use of AI? I'm not sure.
Well, maybe that's a good point for us to stop at, perhaps, and a little teaser for we could talk perhaps in March a little more about the nuance of these things. And so I'm really looking forward to our conversation then, Tsahi. Thanks for sharing your industry insights with us. Always a pleasure to speak with you. For those watching who want to learn more about Tsahi, go to bloggeek.me. And we'll talk again on March 13th. So for those watching today, make sure to follow WebRTC Ventures on LinkedIn, sign up for a newsletter at WebRTC.ventures to stay informed about all the upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live. Thanks again for joining me, Tsahi. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
And thanks to all of you for joining us and watching today. Let's make it live.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.